Hello Power fans, Mathonical, and you're joining me for the wrap-up and analysis of Bogles. We're going to be first going over the London Mulligan, and then going over the pros, cons, and changes like normal. So starting with the London Mulligan, it has felt pretty nice, and I do think it has helped this deck just a little bit. Of course, leaving it there isn't really what I want to do, so instead, I hope you're seated for this because it might get a little scary, we're going to go over some stats. I do have to preface this with I don't have enough games to be statistically significant, and I also don't have prior Bogles Mulligan data to compare this to. But I did find a couple interesting numbers I would like to share with you. Over the 64 games I've played, 4 of which were in leagues and then 1 challenge, I found that I've mulliganed about 40% of the time. And this is one of the things I really want to keep track of because the London Mulligan system only ever applies if you mulligan. So Bogles, since I thought it was one of the decks that would mulligan the most in Pauper, is what I want to do. And a 40% mulligan rate should give us some interesting information, and sure enough it does. I found out that I was only losing about 5.1% win rate with the first mulligan, and then a 6.7 win rate on the second one. This is actually a bit lower than I was expecting. In the past, in Articles of Red, mulligans usually would cost you about 10%. That was the common consensus. So the fact that we're seeing half that is really impressive. Now I do expect Bogles had a lower than average win rate change in the past, simply because if you get the right set of cards, you just kind of win the game in many circumstances. But it's definitely improved. 5% win rate loss to turn a non-functional hand into a perfectly keepable hand is fantastic. With these numbers here, I'm also going to have a link in the description below if you'd like to take a closer look at these, as well as a blank mulligan statistics tracker. So if you'd like to do some stats on your own time with your own games, feel free. Yeah, London Mulligan, I do approve, and I hope it comes to Pauper. Moving on with the rest of the analysis, we've got the pros. This deck is fast. That's both in gameplay and in closing speed. You're going to be able to slam your cards down. If your opponent doesn't have an answer, you're just going to win the game, and even if they do, you might still win anyways. It's also very difficult to interact with since many decks are going to be packing removal, and that doesn't affect you, especially in game 1. Also, this deck is very flexible since you have a bit of a toolbox approach with Heliod's Pilgrim. You can feel free to change around some of the main board auras, like if you wanted a Cartouche of Strength there, no problem. And the sideboard is also quite flexible since we have access to all colors. You can play almost anything you want there if you are expecting certain decks in your metagame. On the negative side, however, this deck is very linear. You're just trying to play a hexproof creature, make it get bigger, and hope that wins the game. So if your opponents are expecting that, they will most certainly have ways of stopping you from doing that. So quite often a lot of our sideboard cards get dedicated to stopping them stopping us, and yeah, it's a bit of a rock, paper, scissors some of the time. This deck also lacks reliability. Now we did just go over how the London Mulligan has improved this deck's ability to find those cards you're looking for. We do have to keep in mind that with 10 hexproof creatures, any given 7 cards is only going to have a 74% chance of having one of them in opening hand, and that's not even to say anything about having the lands and the auras we need to win the game. The London Mulligan is taking that 74% chance and keeping it there, because in the past that first mulligan would cost you 6% chance of finding it, the next one after that would be 7, and so on. So this is why I feel like the London Mulligan does help it, but we still do lack some reliability, and we're giving that up because this deck is really fast and hard to interact with. On to the changes. There is one that I've mentioned already, the possibility of having the Cartouche of Strength in the main board, and I think we could make room for it if we took out the Relic of Progenitus. I've found that there hasn't been a lot of graveyard reliant decks lately, so I feel like we can give up our ability to interact with their graveyard. Of course, if you're in a meta that you would like to keep that effect, keep it in the main board, move it to the side, anything like that, but just having a tutorable way to destroy one of our opponent's creatures might be something we're looking for. Alternatively, we could put in Unbridled Growth instead in that position, just because I have found with 13 white sources it can be a little difficult at times to keep a white source on the field. Onto the sideboard, I haven't been a big fan of the Mutagenic Growth. The best use it usually ever has is to prevent your creatures from getting wiped out by an Electrickery when you go to enchant it, but this is why we have Crimson Acolyte, and it does this job just way better, since you can bring those in as creatures and just enchant them themselves if you're playing against burn or something like that. Also, that will then free up a spot, and in that spot I currently have a Ray of Revelation, since I am expecting Bogles to have an uptick, especially with the London Mulligan system. Of course, you can put anything in that slot. If you are playing against Affinity, you can bring in a Gorilla Shaman. If you're playing against a lot of burn, you can bring in an extra Hydroblast. That is just part of the flexibility of the deck. So, in the end, I've had quite a lot of fun playing Bogles, and I hope you will too. Thank you very much for watching the series. Like, comment, subscribe, and have yourselves a wonderful day.